Hello and welcome to this video and to March's book review. Yes, we have a dog, so there might be some random noise every now and again. So, March. Right, let's caveat this by saying that my reading pace, I think, has slowed since last year, so I'm not reading quite as much. But then saying that, all the books I'm reading are somewhere between like 300 and 500 pages, whereas last year I had various different children's books and the Heartstopper series, for example, so maybe it's no wonder that I read more by this point last year than I have so far. But for March I wanted to do my own little like reading thing where I was going to do middle grade March, which is something I made up, where I was going to read a load of middle grade books. However, that didn't really happen. Well, it did. 3 of the books that I've read are middle grade. The other 2 are not, because, as you know, I've been taking part in the Sister Along. Thanks, Jeff. I've been taking part in the Sister Along, so I had the final Brown Sister book to read this month, and then Buzzwordathon didn't fit with my middle grade books, so I couldn't incorporate those. So I'm going to not do it in the order that I've read. I'm going to go through the middle grade books I've read and then the other 2, which is not the order. But we'll get into it anyway. So as you know, if you've seen February's book review, I was partway through Talia and the Book Wanderers, which is the first book in the Pages & Co series by Anna James. This follows Tilly, whose grandparents own a bookshop, and she has the ability to page jump, so she can go into the worlds that the books are in, and like the characters can come to her bookshop to talk to her. There's a whole rule system around it, which is explained very clearly in the book. And I don't know if you can see these books because of my lighting, apologies, and there's not a lot I can do about it. So this one, being the first book, we learn about the world, we learn about Tilly, all of that kind of things. And if I read this when I was of the age, so sort of your 9-year-old-ish era, I would have really enjoyed it. There's a lot of characteristics in Tilly that would have resonated with me as a child. Also, the idea of going into your favourite books is just very exciting. I would say though that the books that she goes into are all older books which I would not have read as a 9-year-old. So a lot of the references I wouldn't have got to the books. I mean, one of them's Alice in Wonderland, for example, so I would have understood that because of the Disney film. But Anne of Green Gables is another. Wouldn't have got any of the references in that. Now I know why Anna James would have picked those, because those books are out of copyright, so she can write with it about them without having to do a whole legal process to it. But for the age range that she's going for, they are not books that I would assume are commonly read. So there's a bit of a disconnect between her audience and what she's writing. As I say, I understand why, but also I don't understand why. So because of the age that I am, I have read those books, I did get the references and it did make it enjoyable. But as I said, as a 9-year-old or however old the middle grade audience is, I wouldn't have got it. So I may have lost some of my enjoyment because of that. I also found that because this is the first in a series, that it was just a big setup for subsequent books, which was a bit frustrating. We'll go on to another series, but that first book felt like it could be a standalone. Like, it wasn't just a big setup for future books like this one felt like. So it was a bit like an extended prologue, if that makes sense. Saying that, I did enjoy the ending. If I found the others in the series at, you know, a cheap price, I probably would pick them up. Obviously, I'm not the age group that this is aimed at, but I did enjoy it. That was Tilly and the Book Wanderers by Anna James. Now, as I said, these are not the order that I read them in, but I started the other middle grade books I read. I started the Nevermoor series. So the first one obviously was Nevermoor, The Trials of... Now, do we call her Morgan or Morrigan? I'm going to go with Morgan just because it makes life easier for me. So the Trials of Morgan Crow. Feel like now I want to say Morrigan, but there we go. And then the second book in that series is Wundersmith, The Calling of Morgan Crow. So this obviously follows Morgan, or Morrigan Crow, as she goes to the land of Nevermoor and learns about her own power, about the society there, which is the same but not the same as where we are, and all of that kind of stuff. Compared to Talia and the Book Wanderers, I found that Nevermoor was a much more adventure kind of story, so that made it move a bit quicker. However, this is the debut of this author, I believe, Nevermoor, the first book, and I did find the pacing a little bit odd. You would get to this big climactic, exciting event, and then you'd peter off and you'd have like a slow patch, and then you'd get an event and then you'd have a slow patch. It didn't sort of run nicely into each other. I'm going to just have to pause you because I'm going to run out of time. Sorry if anything's moved or changed. I needed to make some space on my memory card. But going back to Nevermoor, I was talking about the pacing and how it didn't quite work for me personally. But I sort of put that down to it being the first book in the series, and I believe, as I said, the debut of this author. I did really enjoy Morgan's relationship with Hawthorne, who's her like best friend, and as you may have gathered from the title and the fact it's the Trials, I enjoyed that. So in this book she's going through a number of trials to get into the Wondrous Society, which is like the elite people in the Nevermoor world, and it's a bit like a school that she's trying to get into, and she has to pass, I think it was 3 or 4 trials to get in there, and that's the premise of this book, and I very much enjoyed that aspect of it. I did find there were some similarities to the sort of Harry Potter series, which I guess is some of the inspiration. Certainly the bad guy in this is obviously going to be the bad guy in all of the books, but on the whole did enjoy it a lot, which is why I picked up the second book, which is Wundersmith. This one I thought was paced better. I thought she'd learnt from some of the mistakes from the first one, but I did think that the first one had a better storyline to it and a better plot to it. So I can't really tell you what this one is about because it will spoil things. It's the second in a series, but we're continuing continuing to follow Morgan and her friends, and this one has a lot of themes about struggling to be accepted and that kind of thing, which is quite prevalent in the age range that this is targeting. Coincidentally, it's also one of the themes in Talia and the Book Wanderers. We are introduced to more characters in this one, but I don't think they're fully fleshed out. But then, as I said, there's at least 4 books in this series, so I guess that will come with time. And the bad guy that was introduced to us in this book obviously appears in this one, and I like the fact that you question him a bit more in this and his motives and things like that. So on the whole, I have enjoyed the Nevermoor series that I've read so far. I would say that I preferred the first one in terms of the plot. It kept me more engaged, but certainly she'd improved in coming to the second one. So I am about to start the third, which is called Hollowpox, and I'm going to start that one tonight, and hopefully I'll get that done by the end of March. But obviously with this video coming out today, the Wednesday when you're watching it, I have... Hello?
Hello. Can you come out with...
I know Pete's calling. So I'm filming this on the 26th of March, so we've got about 6 days left of the month, so I'm hoping to get Hollowpox done within that time. But it is a chunky boy. I mean, this one is like 400 pages. I think we have another like 50, 60 on top of that for Hollowpox. But as I said, I'll talk to you about that one next month. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, there are a couple of books that weren't part of the middle grade March that I was trying to do, and the first one of those was Actual Age Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert. This is the third and final book in the Brown Sisters series, and obviously in this one we're following Eve, who's the youngest sister of the three, and she is essentially cut off by the parents because she can't keep a job, and she's told that if she can keep a job for a year then they'll reinstate her allowance and things like that. So we're following her. Oh, I don't know why I've got dirt on this one. But we're following her as she works out that one. As with all of the others, there's obviously a love interest. These are romance books. So in this one, Eve meets Jacob, who owns a hotel, or a B&B, in, I think it's the Lake District. As with all of the Brown Sisters, I did enjoy this a lot. I think it's probably my least favourite of the three, and I think that's just because me and Eve are nothing alike, and Jacob is probably my least favourite love interest. But that's not to say that it isn't a good book. I would say though that I'm sure this one is snottier than the other two. I'm sure there's a lot more of that in this book, but I mean the other two have smut. That's obviously a given, but I'm sure this one has more of it. I'm just going to say the purple item is the scene that springs to mind when I'm thinking of that. If you've read the book, you'll know what I'm on about. So this one obviously still has the heart on the humour of the other two. There is a whole heap of awkwardness in this one, as they're trying to figure out each other because they're both... so Jacob does have autism and Eve is questioning whether she does, so that's adding to their sort of trying to work each other out and work out where they stand with each other and stuff like that, but it does lead to a lot of awkwardness. And yeah, I'm so glad I've read this series. They've definitely been my favourite books of the year so far, and I really want Talia Hibbert to write more from these characters because I really want to know what they're up to now. And yeah, just very much enjoyed the series, and if it wasn't for what Victoria read's Sister Along, I probably wouldn't have read them quite so soon, and I'm so glad that I did. So yeah, that was Actual Age Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert. And the last book that I'm going to talk about, and the one that I finished yesterday, is 12 Secrets by Robert Gould. Now this is the book that I read for the Buzzwordathon. The prompt this month was a book with secret or secrets or secretive in the title, so obviously 12 Secrets. That hits the prompt very well. This is actually one of the books that Pete bought and took on honeymoon with us, so he's read this one too, and when I went into it he said that it was good, but you can guess it. And I would agree. It does take a while for it to get going. It's quite a slow start. There are an awful lot of characters, which did make things very confusing for most of the book, because I don't think they're not expanded on enough, and there's not enough difference between them, so I got very confused. But I did enjoy being with our main character Ben, who had a troubled life. His older brother is murdered, and several years later his mum commits suicide when she jumps in front of a train. We're coming up to the 10-year anniversary of the mum, and then a murder happens which throws suspicion on both his brother's murder and his mum's suicide and all of that kind of stuff. So we're following a whole heap of things there. And as I said, there's a whole cast of characters that we've also got to try and keep an eye on, which, as I said, did confuse me a lot. The beginning is very slow. It does speed up in the last third. We get reveal after reveal after reveal after reveal. There's an awful lot of twists and turns. I would say I guessed majority of them, The final one or two I probably didn't guess, but there was a lot throughout that I did. But saying that, there was a lot of points in the subplots that I didn't guess. So it sort of weighs itself out that way. This obviously does have lots of dark themes to it. Not only do we have suicide, murder, there is also rape, probably some more that I can't think of. So a lot of dark themes, so definitely check out any of the warnings before going into this if those are the kind of things that you are triggered by. And this is a debut novel, so same with the Nevermoor series. I reckon if you read more of Robert Gould's work, that'll get better, because I did really enjoy it. There was a lot of good points to it. The downside was, again, some of the pacing and some of the reveals to it. So a very easy book to binge. I read a good 100 pages in a sitting quite easily, and I haven't done that for a long time. So did enjoy it. A few flaws here and there, but definitely looking out for his next book, which I believe is 11 Liars. So yeah, that was 12 Secrets by Robert Gould, and the last of the books that I'm going to share with you today. Apologies if I've rambled on or I've gone off, I've got confused. There's been a whole heap of things. The memory card went, Pete rang, all of that stuff. So hopefully it makes sense and it's coherent for you. But on the whole, I'm having a good reading year, even if I'm not reading as quickly as I maybe once was last year. Next month, obviously, I'm going to read the third in the Nevermoor series, and then I think I'm toying with the idea of doing a random number generator and just finding a book that way on my TBR to read. So make sure that you click that subscribe button if you're interested to see what I read next month. And also, you know, I have vlogs each week and stuff like that, so if you're interested in what's going on in life, there's also those. If you've enjoyed this one specifically, please give it a thumbs up, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!